Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Kimberly if you're new, and today I want to show you how I make one of my favorite meals out of my homegrown produce. This is a simple pasta and vegetable dish. I'm vegetarian, but if you wanted to have it along with your favorite meat, that would be great. So I've been gone to the United States for almost a month. I live in the mountains of Ecuador, and my garden's been neglected. But I worked all day this morning and I still found plenty of things I could harvest. So I harvested all this beautiful spinach and this basil that I had in the greenhouse. I've got some red bell peppers, some of the ugliest zucchini I think I've ever grown, but I think it's going to taste just as good. And these are onions from my garden. I didn't harvest these today. I've had them for a little while. And then this garlic is store-bought. Some of the other ingredients I'll be using, I have this whole grain spaghetti that I enjoy. You could really use probably any kind of pasta. And I have these are wonderful. These are grape tomatoes that I purchased and dried them in my dehydrator. And they add so much flavor, but I often make this dish when I have most of these ingredients. Today, I actually have them all. But if you didn't have, for example, the basil, or you didn't have the spinach, or you didn't have the tomatoes, you could still make this dish work. I have many times. The other optional ingredient that I'm really happy that I have on hand today is some Parmesan cheese. I just pulled this out of my freezer. That makes it great. And my own personal preference, I really enjoy coarse ground black pepper on top of it all. So let's get started cutting some things up. The first thing I want to do, I've got a pot of water on the stove, and I'm going to go ahead and turn that on so it can come up to a boil. I'm going to mention that a dear friend and neighbor brought me over some flowers to welcome me home. And I made yogurt last night, and I'm straining it to make Greek yogurt. If you haven't seen that video, I have a video on how to do that. So let me get my cutting board. And the first thing I want to cut up are the onions. Still a little bit of garden dirt there. The thing I love about living in Ecuador is that I can grow my own produce year-round here. For many years I gardened in Alaska, and while I loved that, I had such a short growing season. So most of the year I was not eating out of my garden. But here in Ecuador, even if I go away for a month, I still come home and find lots of things I can eat. So I'm just going to clean up these onions. Move this out of the way. I like to make a big batch of this particular dish, and when I have it on hand in my refrigerator, I'll usually portion it out into individual serving size containers. I'll grab for this. It's my go-to meal. If I have it, I'll probably want to be eating it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's really a favorite of mine. Okay, so I'm just going to be cutting up these onions like so. I've already put a little bit of oil in my pan. I used olive oil, but you could use any oil you like. Okay. I'm going to get these softening while I cut up the other veggies. These zucchini really are funny looking. I have no idea what caused that, but I'm not at all concerned about how they're going to taste. I know they're going to be delicious. I usually go for more of a balance 50-50 with the yellow and the green. I like the contrast of the colors and the visual appeal that that provides, but I'm making do today with what I found. I have a whole lot of mature zucchini plants that I'm ready to pull out very soon. As soon as I have something different that I can put in the ground, I'll be taking those out. But for now, they're providing me dinner. On the end of my counter here, I keep a bucket where I save all of my organic matter to go in the compost bin. But recently, we have acquired some animals on our homestead, and instead of just feeding everything to my compost, a lot of it's going to the animals. So I'm just going to cut these up. Oop. I wish I had better knife skills. I watch some of my favorite YouTube videos, and some of the content creators have these beautiful knife skills, and I've never learned them. But thankfully, my husband and my son keep my knives nice and sharp for me, so I can still get the job done. Let me try a smaller one here. You can hear those onions sizzling on the stove, so I'm going to give them a quick stir. Sometimes if the zucchini is really large in diameter, I'll cut it lengthwise. I don't think I'll need to do that today. I prefer these young, tender zucchini. Now, when I go to the market here in Ecuador and look at zucchini, mostly what I find is the very large ones, the ones that I personally would only see fit to either give to the animals or to shred up for zucchini bread. The ones I prefer to eat are the young, tender ones. Maybe a little bigger than the yellow one that I cut up, a little bit smaller than these. But I did used to find those, or I still do find them at the market if I have a time where I don't have any zucchini growing in my own garden. I have bought them. Sometimes I wonder, why do I go to all the effort to grow my own food when I can find produce, locally grown produce, very affordable here at the market? But I just enjoy the satisfaction of growing my own food, and I also enjoy knowing that it's organic. I'll give these onions a quick stir again. The other thing I like is I like picking it fresh from the garden and cooking it and eating it, or at least cooking it the very same day. So I'll probably eat on this for several days, but most of these ingredients were picked fresh from my garden today. They haven't been sitting at the market, at the supermarket, or sitting in my refrigerator for several days. I like that nice fresh taste. I like knowing that the food is fresh, and I understand, or it's my belief, that the produce, when it's fresh picked, has more nutrients in it, that a lot of nutrition is lost when the produce sits after it's been harvested. Okay, so we got those done. Let me get into the peppers here. I think I'm going to turn these quite a bit down. They're cooking really fast, and I'm not quite ready with the rest. You can tell my garden's organic because I've got a little bug hole here where a bug chewed on it, but otherwise it's fine. I don't mind eating bug-approved produce. So I'm going to go ahead and add the zucchini to these onions. So I've already given everything a good wash. So I'm just going to cut these up into some little chunks, something like that. I really, really love red, yellow, and orange bell peppers. I've never enjoyed the green ones, but I can understand why the green ones are much more readily available and less expensive now that I've been growing them. Give that a little stir. The reason is that the pepper plant will produce the green peppers, and then once the green pepper has reached its full size, it takes another nearly a month for it to ripen to whatever color it will be. But all of the peppers, no matter what color they ripen to, whether it's a purple or an orange, yellow or red pepper, they all start out green. The green is just immature and unripe, and I prefer the ripe flavor. But if you prefer green peppers, you certainly could use those in this dish. They're easier to grow and they're more economical to buy. I like it when I have a medley of colors, but right now I only have red bell peppers growing in my garden. Okay, get those in here. It's so beautiful and colorful. Water's almost to a boil. Okay, let me get my garlic. If you're a big garlic lover like I am, you can use a lot of garlic. It's best to peel your garlic sooner rather than later, and use the garlic press on it, mince the garlic, because the nutritional benefits of the garlic come out more when it sits a little bit before you cook it or eat it. I have grown my own garlic here, but it's been very hit or miss. I really only had one very successful garlic harvest. And since then, I've tried a number of times without success. And I'm not sure, I think it might have something to do with cold stratification. And sometime when I get the inclination, the motivation to experiment with that, I want to give it a try again. Our temperatures here might get down in the 40s at night, but we don't have freezing temperatures. And the garlic might benefit from having a period of cold for it to grow better. Interestingly, the garlic that I grew successfully, I grew in my greenhouse, which doesn't make sense to me because it's warmer in the greenhouse. Okay, that'll be enough garlic. Now you could season this with salt, but what I like to use, I really enjoy the Montreal steak seasoning blend, and I'm going to add a little bit of that now. That water should be boiling soon. I'm going to go ahead and open up the pasta. Be prepared for it. And now I'm going to start, let me just add this garlic now. Get my cutting board available. I'll stir that in a few minutes. So what I want to start doing is chopping up some of this spinach to have that ready. Just going to grab a big bunch of it. I was so happy when I came home from my trip to see that my spinach was doing well. There were a lot of disappointing things in my garden, things that didn't really grow very well while I was gone, but this spinach made me very happy. It doesn't take very many spinach plants, maybe 6 to 12 of them to keep me in spinach, since I'm the main one that's eating it. But the spinach plants don't last long. Once you get them growing, they only produce for a short time before they want to grow and make flowers and go to seed, which is called bolting. So when I have spinach, I really try to make good use of it. We get 12 hours of daylight year-round here, which is a gardener's delight, but sometimes the sun is very intense, and tender plants might need some protection or plenty of watering. And I think that was the downfall of some of my plants in my absence. All right, so let me stir this together again. I'll mix in that garlic. Looking really good. And the water's boiling, so I'm going to add the pasta. I'm going to do it the same way I saw my mother do it growing up. My son tells me I'm doing it wrong, but I always break it in half. What about you? Do you break your spaghetti noodles in half when you cook them? Or perhaps smaller, or do you leave them long? You can let me know in the comments. I really am curious to know. Okay, I'm going to continue chopping this spinach, and then we'll chop up the basil too. Basil is something I grow a lot of. In fact, most of the basil that I grow, I don't even eat. I end up putting it in my compost bin. I grow so much of it. I will usually grow it, well, I always grow it in my greenhouse. And whenever I plant tomato plants, I'll also order basil plants, and my minimum order is 25 plants, so that's usually what I'm dealing with. And it's supposed to be a good companion plant for tomatoes to help keep away some of the common tomato plant pests. I haven't done any experiments to see how much it actually helps, but I know it looks and smells beautiful, and whenever I need basil, I can run and get it. I have some neighbors that appreciate that I grow basil too. I love how intense the green color is of the spinach. Almost got this chopped. I'm just giving it a very rough cut here. The thing about this spinach is that the leaves are huge. I don't know if it's the variety, but I believe this was grown from seeds I saved from my last spinach. Sometimes I pick spinach and it's the tiny little like baby leaf spinach that you might find in a store. Nice little round leaves, kind of like this basil, but the spinach I came home to are giant kind of arrowhead-shaped leaves, but it still tastes delicious. So now I'm just going to cut up this basil. Again, I'm just going to give it a rough chop, getting rid of these stems, just the big parts of the stems. So I don't want these vegetables to get overcooked here. So I think well, no, I've got them on low. We're fine. Already done that. Let me give the spaghetti a stir. Now, growing up, I saw my mom cook with a lot of packaged foods, and I really didn't see her using herbs or spices. We knew salt, we knew pepper. She would use garlic salt or garlic powder, and not a whole lot else. And so as an adult, I learned to use various herbs like basil and oregano and thyme in my cooking. When I lived in Alaska, I would order them from Azure Standard, dried and in bulk. But coming to Ecuador, it's been a new experience for me to work with fresh herbs, fresh picked from my garden. And I've grown all sorts of things. I almost always have basil, but I also grow dill and cilantro. I've grown rosemary. I often have parsley. What else? I feel like I'm missing something. Did I say thyme? Marjoram? Lots of fresh herbs. It's amazing to have your own fresh herbs that you can pick anytime, because fresh herbs can be quite expensive if you buy them at a grocery store because they're so perishable. Okay, I'm going to add these greens in and let them wilt down a little. It looks like a tremendous amount of greens, but these will really shrink down as they wilt. Okay, give that a good stir. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off now. That's not the proper lid for that, but I don't really want it to steam. I like my vegetables more sauteed. I just want to give the greens a chance to wilt a little bit while I'm waiting on the pasta. That's not done yet. Oh, I don't want to forget adding these tomatoes. So what works really well is adding these. They're quite crunchy and hard. They're not like maybe sun-dried tomatoes that you've purchased at the store before that are in oil. These are not like that. They're very dry. You could grind them up into a powder. But when I add them to my sauteed vegetables, they soften up. And you could add as many or as few as you like. I like a lot of them. Here, let me add a few more. This is so beautiful. Let me see if I can show it to you. Look at that contrast between the deep green spinach and those tomatoes. So both the spinach will wilt and the tomatoes will soften. Let me give it another stir here. I think there's just enough residual heat in here that I won't need to turn this back on. I never use a timer for my pasta. Maybe some of you do. I usually just taste it to see. Years ago, I remember my mom talking about the way to tell if spaghetti is done is to throw it on the wall, and if it sticks, it's done. Have you ever tried that method? I don't usually do that. But I will just try the pasta. I can see that it's flexible. The tricky part is getting one out without burning yourself. Let me give that a little taste. I think it needs another minute. So the next thing I need to do is cut into this Parmesan cheese. I have this great little shredder for Parmesan cheese. When I remember to use it, it's wonderful. So we'll put that to use today. All right, I'm going to drain out the pasta. Let's see if we can get this plated up. I'll give that another stir. It's looking really yummy. Another thing I really like about using those dehydrated tomatoes in this dish is it absorbs some of the extra liquid so that the vegetables do not get mushy or waterlogged. And this is looking really good. Okay. So I've drained my pasta and put it back in the pot. I'm going to add a little bit of butter so it doesn't stick. If you wanted to keep this vegan, you could add a little bit of olive oil. This is some homemade butter. I made it quite by accident. I was trying out a new tool and wanting to make some whipped cream, and it turned to butter. That's kind of a nice accident. Okay. Now at this point you could mix the two together, and I've certainly done that lots of times. If you were serving it to a big crowd, you could do that. But what I find is when I have it all mixed together and then I try to plate it, it's hard to get a good balance between the pasta and the vegetables. And like I mentioned, this is my favorite dish. Sometimes my husband will eat it, but my son not at all. It's my favorite dish, and I'll usually portion it out into individual serving sizes. And so I like to leave the components separate so that I can divide first the pasta and then divide the vegetables on top of that. I'll usually get about 6 servings out of this, and then top it with a Parmesan cheese. But I'm ready to eat dinner, so I'm going to plate some up right now. How delicious does that look? Fresh from the garden. Let me get some toppings on this. I've got my Parmesan cheese. And my coarse ground pepper. I normally like a bit more Parmesan cheese than that, but we'll go with that for now. And there you go. It's a really favorite dish of mine. Let me know if you try it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see some of my other videos, you can find them on my channel, Alaskans in the Andes.